Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Today, I'm talking to Ceil DiGuglielmo. Ceil is the owner of So Much More Custom Sewing for Their Home, which is a trade custom workroom. She's passionate about education and technology in the window coverings and soft furnishings industry. She is a member of the Window Covering Association of America, currently serving in the role as National Secretary, and she's the immediate past president of her local Pennsylvania chapter. Ceil is the producer of the So Much More podcast, which is an interview-style podcast for the window treatment and soft furnishings industry. Ceil is an Evernote certified consultant, and she offers Evernote training to designers and workroom owners to help them run their businesses more efficiently and profitably. Ceil is a dear, dear friend of mine. I've been on her podcast many times, and you're going to hear us kind of flip the script a little bit and put her on the other side where I get to ask her questions. But she's seriously a delight. Ceil has never been one to hold back from sharing that she really has a challenge with fear. And so that's what our entire conversation is about today, fear, and how it keeps you stuck and how it affects profitability, but not just the money. It affects the profitability of your ability to even do the work that is in front of you to do. And so we're going to learn from her a couple of things that she did and how she was able to overcome her fear, take the next step, keep moving, keep going, and even recognize fear in a different way. Enjoy today's podcast. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Ceil, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Michelle. It's my pleasure. It's interesting to be on this side of the microphone.
I know, exactly. So I want to start before we jump in and talk about your business. Mm-hmm. And I just want to give you a great big virtual hug and a great big thank you. As you know, but not everybody else may know, you have a podcast called the So Much More podcast. And I have been doing a series on there called Profit is a Choice.
Correct.
And right?
Yes.
And interestingly, as we've been doing that series, and I've been on your podcast multiple times, it just became apparent that the conversations kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And there was certainly no way that I could hijack your podcast and talk every single time. And so, you really encouraged me, along with Kate Grunke of the Kate Show, that it was time for me to step out on my own. And so I just want to thank you for that. I had toyed around with this for a couple of years and just the timing was never right. And this time your great big push was what I needed. So thank you so much for that.
It was my turn to bulldog you with love and return the encouragement to you that you've given me so much over the years. So it was truly my pleasure, and it's been really fun for me to watch you learn the technology and the terms and the things necessary to put out a podcast. And you've helped me by making me look again at my podcast and saying, oh, I'm not doing that on mine. Why aren't I doing that? So it's been a great experience, and it's been, as I said, wonderful to be able to give back to you just a tiny little bit of what you've given me over the years. So thank you.
You are very welcome. Okay, so let's jump in, and I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about your business, or I'll say businesses.
I was going to say, which one shall I start with? The business that I have had the longest is So Much More Custom Sewing for the Home. It is a to-the-trade workroom. I'm a solopreneur. I work alone 90% of the time. I do have someone that I have who comes in and works with me occasionally, but most of the time it is me, myself, and I. I specialize in working and collaborating with interior designers to help them in the process of creating custom window treatments for their clients. Whatever they need, whether it's the seasoned designer who just needs a second set of eyes and ears because they work alone and they want somebody to determine, is an 18-inch drop better or is a 19-inch drop better? You hold the tape measure, you step back. I have one designer who I work with in that way, and she picks the fabric, she picks the hardware, but she respects my opinion about things, and so we collaborate. And I get to be part of the process. I get to see all the beautiful fabrics and the furniture and the wall color and wallpaper and rugs, and I don't have to select any of it. Part of my business where I would be hired in a retail environment to help a client, and they'd start asking me what color rug, and I didn't know. I'm not trained for that. I don't have that skill set. And so I much prefer working with interior designers. But I also have some younger, less experienced designers who know nothing about window treatments. So they do the rest of the room. They contact me when they're ready to do the window treatments, and I try to get involved in the process sooner. That's still a learning experience for some of them. But then I provide everything they need: hardware, fabric, design, whatever it is they need. So I'm a partner to interior designers. That's one business. I also have my podcast, which is So Much More Podcast. I interview people in our industry, and a play on the title, So Much More. I've also reached out to people outside of the industry that either are entrepreneurs or in the sewing industry that I think would be of interest to my listeners. I really believed that I would interview about 10 to 20 people, and it would be the same story over and over. Okay, we're done. And after about the fourth interview, I went, oh, we are really different, and we have different stories, different beginnings, different career paths. And it just became fascinating to me to hear these stories. And apparently to my listeners, because they keep listening. So that's been a lot of fun and a great journey. But about 2 years ago, I became an Evernote certified consultant. I was using Evernote in my own business. I am not a naturally organized person. I saw how Elke Horn was using it in her business, and I was using it for recipes and knitting patterns and things like that. And I realized the potential. And once I realized how beneficial it was to me, I realized there was a need for this in our industry. I don't like the word paperless because I like a piece of paper on my work table. I like to do the math, but I can scan that piece of paper and put it in the note, and I never lose it, and it's always together. So I've started one-on-one coaching in Evernote and some small group training in Evernote, and it's kind of like the new fire in my soul. I just love that look on people's faces when they get it and go, I can use it for that. That's awesome. And both the podcast and Evernote are part of my exit strategy. I'm in the second half of my life, and what we do as window treatment workrooms is exhausting physically, and it's hard on our bodies. And as I get older, I want to pay more attention and take better care of my body. And so I don't know what the time term is for that. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much longer I'll make window treatments. I'm still making them, but it's not going to be forever. I physically can't do it forever, but I'm not ready to give it up just yet. So those are my three businesses.
Okay. And I understand that, especially from owning a custom drapery workroom myself for 16 years. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, having some health issues that physically made it difficult for me to continue.
Right.
So I get that. So, okay, I'm going to just open up the conversation in the big way and ask you, have you always been profitable in your businesses?
Oh, no. I think both the podcast and Evernote, those businesses are benefiting from the years that I was not profitable in my window treatment business. And I did not make a mistake by adding an S to years. I started my business in 2005. And I think the first 2 years, I really was so I was doing and so hesitant that I kind of took whatever jobs came my way. I was good about saying yes to jobs and figuring out how to do them after I said yes. So fear didn't stop me from taking those jobs, but I didn't really know how to market myself. I didn't understand my financials. I didn't understand a profit and loss statement. I had money in my account at the end of the month, so I must be making money. And I think I did that for a couple of years, and then the recession hit, and that was extremely challenging. I think that was when I actually took a part-time job. So I was making the window treatments, but also working part-time. I would say I probably was in business at least 5 years before I was making a profit. And I had heard so many times businesses either succeed or fail within the first 5 years. And somehow that made a connection for me. Like if I wasn't profitable the first 5 years, it didn't matter. Well, hello, that's 5 years of my life I gave up without actually being profitable. Did I make some money? Yes, not much. So I think I took your Pricing Without Emotion class for the first time in 2011. And that was a pivotal thing for me, because even though I had read Kitty Stein's book, Price Your Work with Confidence, I didn't know how to put some of those things into place. And there were moments that you said things like, you helped us figure out what we were making per hour. And I will admit here and now, because it was 8 years ago, my final hourly pay was $7 an hour.
That's not uncommon.
Right.
I mean, it's not great,
right.
But it's not uncommon when people do the work for the first time.
And at that time, my children were working part-time for more than that per hour. And what you said, you asked the question, would you let someone you love go out and work for this much per hour? And when I came back from the ladies' room where I was crying, I said, no, I wouldn't. And I won't let myself do that. So that was when I started to pay attention to what money was coming in, where was it going, how was I spending it, and being more conscious. For a small workroom to invest in an entire bolt of lining when they don't know how many more jobs there are going to be. It was little things like that that I had to have some confidence in the fact that the work would come, and that by buying my lining by the yard was not serving me, and waiting until the next deposit before I would buy enough lining for the next job. It just held me back. And I wasn't making decisions based on what was best for my business. I was making it best. I was making the decisions based on how much money I had.
It sounds too that you were making some decisions, and I completely understand, because I did the same thing at the beginning. I was making decisions for the moment, not decisions for the long term. So, for example, I was going out and buying linings and interlinings and things retail, and then trying to use them, which is the equivalent for an interior designer going out to Home Goods or something like that to buy things. You know, we're running out buying at retail. We're never going to make the money that we can make.
Correct.
Selling retail to retail to retail. It's just a model that's not long-term sustainable.
Right.
With great profit.
Not only do you not make any money off of what you're selling, but it requires more effort to attain those products. So if I was going to Joann Fabrics, I had to leave my house. I had to go there. I had to wait to find somebody to help me. I had to wait to get a cut. I order a bolt of fabric from Hanes or Angels, and it's here the next day. I've got more than I need for this job. So when I'm ready to start the next job, I don't have to go back. Like, it was little things like that didn't, I needed to absorb and learn more than once before I was clear on it. So taking your course helped me to stop and think about more of those things. And I also remember in 2007, I attended a conference in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and it was Cheryl Strickland's conference. Terry Boozer did a workroom, how to run a workroom class. And there was a young woman who asked the question about why couldn't she use the profits to buy shoes for her kids or school supplies. And Terry explained the difference between separating your business from your family income and having a separate checking account. At that point, I did not. So it was advice that I took to heart and realized that if I did not follow through with these things, I was not a business, that this was just a hobby. And I didn't articulate it the way you did until much later. But if I kept it that way, then I had given up a good paying job to stay home with my children and have this is the way you articulated it, it really stuck with me, so that my husband could go to work, work hard for our family, and I could stay home and make things for wealthy people and not get paid for it.
Right. I mean, that was my story. That's what I did.
When you said those words at
Mm-hmm.
the last class that I went to with you, that was, oh, that's what I've been feeling. That's what's wrong, is when I don't make money, I'm not contributing to our family's financials, and I'm spending a whole lot of my effort and time making things for people who really can afford what I'm doing. So I should be paid for it. And I know there are people who will listen to this, Michelle, and relate to it. And there are people who will listen to it and say, well, what the heck was she doing making winter treatments all those years for? I didn't have a business background. I didn't understand the importance of a lot of this. So it just took me a little longer, I think, than some other people. And again, as you and I have talked about, fear has been a big part of why I didn't do things.
I think there's so many lessons in what you've just shared. I would say a lot of people, because I've experienced, conversations with them, come into creative industries because they're following a passion and not necessarily because they're coming in with a business background or business understanding. And it takes a couple of years to get knocked around to figure out what's not working. I call that connecting the dots. Mm-hmm. And so once they start connecting the dots, which is pretty much the name of this podcast, that profit is a choice. So every choice and every decision impacts that number. For example, buying a bolt of lining versus buying cut yardage, buying multiple pieces from the same vendor to save on shipping versus one piece from 12, or, let's say sourcing from the same vendors over and over, as opposed to every single order that comes in trying to find 50 ways to source it. Right. We don't always recognize that many of those choices are not leading us to profit. And so your story is probably the story of the masses. If you strip out, some of the identifiers like workroom and lining, we could probably all, at least in the first year or two, even if we came in with a business plan, put ourselves in the position of understanding how we didn't always understand how the choices added up.
Yes.
To either making or losing money.
And I think, Michelle, there's, you and I did our little book review. And one of the things that Jack Canfield has in his book about taking responsibility, I was very reluctant to take responsibility for the business part of it because I was creative and I'm a creative person and I don't have this background. So I was willing to relinquish that responsibility and not take it on and not follow through because I was creative. And that gave me the excuse that I was looking for to not face the numbers. When I had to face them, it was uncomfortable.
Right.
So I did not take that responsibility.
Okay. In the book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women by Valerie Young. And let me just segue here and let the listeners know, you and I recently did a podcast together for your show on all of the business books that we've read. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Okay, great. Because I think, who doesn't love a good business book? But in The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, Valerie Young says that one of the biggest reasons that we have the imposter syndrome, or we have this idea that we're not enough, is because we work in a creative field. And she says this: the very nature of creative work makes those who do it vulnerable to feeling inadequate, especially if you are not formally trained. For one, your work is highly public, plus you are defined not only by your work, but by artistic and literary standards that are completely subjective.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's why we are all, and I know that you talk about comparison, and that's why we're all comparing ourselves, because art is subjective.
Yes.
Right? It's always, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Right. Well, welcome to the interior design industry, yes, where I look at pictures some days and I think, I wouldn't have that if you gave it to me. And then I look at other pictures where people are slamming it and I'm going, I like that.
Exactly.
Okay. And so when you are creative, whether it is art or design or window coverings or upholstery or whatever it is we're doing as part of this umbrella industry, we're putting our work out there. In some ways, it is a piece of us that we feel like we're
Yes.
putting out there. And so it does lead to fear. It does lead to an imposter syndrome until we have kind of dealt with that and realized the subjectivity of it and thought to ourselves, it's okay if you don't like it because somebody else will.
Exactly.
And that's where the confidence of that starts to come in.
But I think that's what you just quoted, that there's danger in that of allowing yourself to not take the responsibility for it by saying, well, I'm just creative. So that's not an excuse. There are too many programs. QuickBooks is not easy to use, but it's doable. And if you can't do it, then you pay somebody to do it. And there are, you have courses on how to understand all the financials. There's no excuse not to take the responsibility for it. And if at a certain point you don't, then you have a hobby. And if that's what you want, absolutely go for it. But the other thing I think that impacted me early on in my business was when I did not charge for either a consultation or if I was going out to clients' homes and I was not charging more for my window treatments than when I worked with a designer and I was providing design and selecting fabrics and things like that. My rationale was, I'm not an interior designer, so I'm not qualified to be paid for this. And it was in that same Pricing Without Emotion class that you talked about the damage it does within the industry and to our peers when we don't respect that service has a value. And my first thought was, oh, that was never my intention to do that. But it doesn't matter what my intention was. If someone could come to me and pay less, why would they go to an interior designer? Well, first, because it would be more professionally designed if they had gone to a designer. And secondly, I was undercutting the designers by doing that. And so I had to rethink all of that. And that all figured into my process of no longer doing retail work. Can I design window treatments? Yes. Can I pick colors that work? Yes. I don't enjoy it. And I don't enjoy looking for fabric. It's just not what I'm best at. And so that's why I have designers do it. And that's a value that needs to be paid for. And I was undercutting them when I didn't charge for it.
And I am in agreement with that we have to charge for the value that we bring and that the value that is actually recognized in the industry, right? So I'm going to turn our discussion a little bit and I want to ask you about fear. You and I have been friends for years, right? We've been friends for a lot of years. And I know this conversation about fear has come up on more than one occasion. And it comes up on your podcast. So it comes up, I'm not saying anything that we've not talked about in public before.
I've been very open about that.
Right. Just a little bit different forum here. But tell me how you think fear has impacted your business and tell me a little bit about your struggle with fear.
So I think my biggest fear is the fear of making mistakes.
Okay.
How will I be perceived if I make a mistake? And one of the great things, if Michelle reaches out and asks you to be on her podcast, say yes. Here's why. I started to think about why am I so afraid of making mistakes? And let me say this first. My parents raised 9 children who were 11 years apart. And they didn't kill any of us. So I think they were excellent parents.
That's right.
They did the best they could. But in our house, the statement was, if you can't do it right the first time, then don't bother doing it at all. My mother did not have time for us to experiment and play around. And what she used to say, I did curly cues on the kitchen table. I'd be wiping the kitchen table and I would start making patterns because that's what I did. She didn't have time for that. And so if you're not going to wipe the table right, then let me do it and get out of my way because it's got to be done.
That created a message for you in your head though, right?
Exactly. Do it right or don't bother to do it. And so I could have gone, okay, I'm not going to bother to do it. I still wanted my parents' approval enough that I kept trying to do it right. And so when I didn't, I was criticized or told it wasn't good enough, or I criticized myself. So that fear has often stopped me from starting something. It's often stopped me from pursuing an idea or a thought. So short term, I think it slowed me down in the growth of my business. I think I could have grown my business faster if I had not been so afraid. Long term, I think it created so much doubt and the imposter syndrome and things like that, that it just kept me from enjoying the process and enjoying where I was in my life. So I spent too much time worrying, and I think I haven't articulated it quite like this, but I do worry about people judging me. And I'm not sure why that's such a prevalent thing, except I don't want them to see me make a mistake.
So in the same book, two things I want to read to you as I was preparing for our time together today. She says, to begin to connect the dots, look for instances in your own life when you have felt ignored, trivialized, or otherwise taken less seriously. Instances when you had to work harder for your voice to be heard, and or ways you may have been devalued financially. Do you see possible connections between these external realities and your internal struggle to feel competent or deserving? And then she says this. She says, in some cases, the fear of being exposed can be so anxiety producing that you subconsciously do things to undermine your very own success. This is different from withholding effort because on the surface anyway, you're still striving. Here, however, your actions have the effect of undercutting your prospect for success. You may do things like procrastinate, show up late, or come unprepared for an appointment.
I have to get this book.
Yeah.
I clearly have to get this book because what you just described is me. And when one of my younger sisters was getting married, when my mom was still alive, I was making her wedding gown. And my mother was very clear on the fact that my reputation as a procrastinator had her very anxious because she was afraid I would be sewing the dress as my sister walked up the aisle. I was finished her dress long in advance. I want to put that out there first. But we had done my husband is a photographer. We had done a professional shoot. And when I made her veil, I left literally yards of veiling so that we could do some special photographs. And I forgot to trim the veil. So I was not sewing her dress as she walked up the aisle, but the morning of the wedding, I was like, scissors, I need scissors. That's different from procrastination. But that I do procrastinate on things. And it ends up with me not being prepared. I'm much better about this as I've gotten older and my confidence in myself has grown. But when there's a new experience or a new opportunity for me, I can see those things coming back. And I had heard it was a book I listened to on Audible where someone discussed, or it might have been a TED Talk, I don't remember, talking about how fear and excitement are very similar emotions. And then immediately after I heard that, you and I had the conversation.
I want to say it was Simon Sinek. I think I heard a discussion with Simon and somebody else on one of the channels. And
it might have been Mel Robbins that I heard talking about it. And I think she said something about, she heard Simon say this. So, what I've tried to do is take that breath and say, okay, whatever physically I'm feeling isn't necessarily fear. Maybe I really am excited about this. And can I rephrase that and go with that and still be prepared for whatever this is, or still not be late, or still get it done ahead of time so that the feeling that's left after that is truly excitement and not dread and, oh, why did I wait so long and why did I do that? I think I sabotaged myself frequently early on in my life and my business, exactly as you just described.
I know I've done the same thing. I remember the first time I was in a magazine, I think I've told the story, I got 7 or 8 copies of it, but because I didn't have a litany of designations behind my name as a drapery workroom, I didn't tell anybody I was in the magazine. I didn't promote myself. It would have been a marketing opportunity. And I did absolutely nothing with it out of fear of how somebody on the other side was going to perceive me being in a magazine. I've since learned from that, but it still sticks in my brain as a time that I didn't take advantage of a gift that I'd been given in my business that would have increased my profitability.
I had a conversation earlier today with someone and your name came up. And we were talking about what fear and the imposter syndrome does to us. And not pushing through that fear can be devastating. And the example that I used was, what if you had been afraid to teach what you learned about pricing? You've affected so many lives and so many businesses with that class. What if Michelle Williams had sat in her bedroom and said, I am not good enough to teach this. I'm an imposter. I don't know what I'm talking about. What if Elke Horn had decided not to teach how to make Roman shades? So many people now understand the Easy Spring system and how easily they can. Now there's more teachers of Roman shades than Elke, but she's been doing a great deal with that. What if Susan Woodcock had decided not to teach or not to write a book? Who am I to teach?
Or not to have a conference.
Exactly.
I mean, right. I mean, I think that could be said for any of us. What if we had not stepped into the world the way we've been
with the
called
gifts
to step
that we've
into the
been
world?
given?
Gifts that we've been given. All right. So, one of my other favorite all-time books, because I tell every one of my coaching clients about it, and it has freed me up. I tend to act in the face of fear most times. Doesn't mean I don't feel it. A lot of people think after they've met me for a while that I'm just this crazy, courageous, confident woman with no fear, which is not true. I tend to analyze my fears. The older I get and the more I'm aware of them, the more I sit back and analyze them. But the book by John Maxwell, Failing
Yes, that
Forward,
is my next book.
Okay, it's meant everything to me because and I know Susan Woodcock has made this same type of statement before. I don't really know that I'm having failures. I think they're just learning opportunities. Okay, so here's two things that he says. He says the average for entrepreneurs is 3.8 failures before they finally make it in business. 3.8 failures. Now, I don't know that means we got to have 3.8 businesses that fail, but it may be 3.8 opportunities figured out. Nelson Boswell says this: the difference between greatness and mediocrity is often how an individual views a mistake. And then lastly, this is what I keep reminding myself of. I have a son who's in the adult world and one in college. And then, of course, I have a coaching practice. And I love this, that he says, errors become mistakes when we perceive them and respond to them incorrectly. Mistakes become failures when we continually respond to them incorrectly.
Oh, I like that.
So it's really about how we look at what's
how do we
happening.
frame it?
How do we view it?
Right.
How do we frame it? What are we going to do with it next? So when you take that and you couple it with Simon or whoever said the feelings are the same, I mean, I don't think anybody, for the most part, walks out of their day and says, hey, let me go screw up today.
Right.
I think it's rare, and I'm not saying there wouldn't be somebody out there like that. But Sarah Blakely of Spanx, I think she's the one that in one of the conversations with her, I think it was on NPR, which is one of my favorite, How I Built This, one of my favorite podcasts. But she talks about the fact that her father said to her every day, where did you fail today? So when they got around the kitchen table at night, they all sat down and talked about where they failed. And his comment to them was, if you're not failing, you're not stretching, you're not trying. So if you're always playing it safe and you're never failing and you're never skinning your knee, you're not learning anything. You're actually in a bubble. And so she said that difference of how to view an error or a mistake or a failure, that she saw those as almost badges of honor that she tried something. And I just thought to myself, I might not have learned that as a type A, make straight A's kind of gal growing up, but I certainly have started to learn that and embrace that more and more. And I think every day that we tell ourselves, do the best work we can to prepare, right? I mean, certainly prepare. but then be willing to say, well, goodness, that didn't work. How can I
Right.
change that? And then you just got 10 steps better and 10
And
steps
move on
better.
and not dwell on it and not, oh, look at me. I'm such a mess. I made this mistake. I don't treat my children that way. I don't view their mistakes the same way I view my own. So I haven't even been as kind to myself as I am to other people. And that changing of how I frame mistakes has definitely improved as I've gotten older, and I've been willing to make mistakes and sometimes just say, oops, I'll see what I can do to fix that. I released a podcast once where I was, you'll understand it because you edit the sound. I had cut something and slid a piece to the side and I never slid it back. And somebody called me and said, there's like a 15-minute gap in your podcast. I went, whoops. And I went back in and fixed it. So lesson learned, when I finish each podcast, I open it up wide. I go, are there any gaps? No, I'm good. I can move on. I was not embarrassed by that because I was still new at editing podcasts. But even having that happen, like, oh, Ceil, right, you have to learn some things. You're not good at everything the first time you do it. I still need to be reminded, even at my age.
So I'll just be very transparent here as well. When I grew up, I was the type of child who, if I tried something if it was something I wanted to do and I tried it, it always worked out. Because I researched, I thought about it, I was determined.
Prepared for it.
I prepared. However, I also only did the things that I really wanted to do or thought that I could succeed at, and not necessarily intentionally. I think maybe subconsciously to some degree. And so if I had kind of thought, well, maybe I'm not overly athletic, I wouldn't do anything athletic. But when it came to reading a book or doing something in school, I could do it without thinking. Okay. But that's not a trait that necessarily supports you growing up. So then I had my children, with the lessons we learned from our children. And I can remember saying to them, hey, was there a new sport you want to learn? I have two sons. And when they were tiny, one wanted to do t-ball and they wanted to do soccer. Well, they certainly didn't know the game. Half the time they were playing with rocks and kicking dirt. But they went out there and they learned, and they knew they were going to drop the ball or not catch it. They had to learn every single skill. And I remember watching them, and they just did not have fear, because it was just go out there and figure it out. See if you can play it. If you want to do it, let's just go do it. They had no fear going out there for the most part. And I started examining my own life and asking myself, what was it that I might have wanted to do, but I knew I would probably not excel at it, but I wanted to do it anyway. Like, how can I tell my children, go out and give it a good shot, try it if you want to try it, if I'm holding myself back? So I signed up for tennis lessons. I know, well, I looked cute. I had great skirts because I thought my swing might be horrible, but I'll be cute if I'm out there. So I went and got all the best looking tennis stuff. Anyway, I had a good time. I had a group coach. We had a group in our subdivision, and I had an individual one-on-one coach because I needed to understand the mechanics in the game. And I was not the best player out there, which was, different for me. But I had a blast and I learned a lot. And my children got to watch me lead by example, that I wasn't the best and that I actually was probably one of the worst at that game compared to the other people around me. I was low man on the totem pole at the beginning and at the end, but I had a good time. My friends supported me. We actually won the championships in spite of my terribleness. But that sticks in my mind when things come up now, like even putting out a podcast. Okay, Michelle, just keep going. What are you going to do now? Are you going to let the fear stop you? Or and their fears, not even just fears of having the message. The message isn't my fear. It's all the technology and all the work behind it. And honestly, the fear of how much time is it going to take, that I would say probably raises, the flag for me more. But in your favorite book in the whole world, you knew I was going to have to pull this up, Gretchen Rubin's Better Than Before. She says in one of her chapters, it's enough to begin. And the most important step is the first step. The first step is tough, and every action has an ignition cost. What do you think has been some of the ignition costs, that push to get you to take that first step through fear?
I think you and I talked yesterday a little bit about embracing the process. I think the outcome has been so much part of what I looked at most of my life that embracing the process was not an easy thing for me. And it's so interesting that you said that about the first step. You just reminded me, before I turned 40, one of my younger sisters, all of my sisters had been runners, and my youngest two sisters ran cross country. And I was getting ready to turn 40. I was complaining about a few physical things. And we had a very active golden retriever. And my sister Jackie said to me one day, these sneakers are a little bit too big for me. I know your feet are bigger than mine. Maybe they'll fit you. And they did. She said, maybe you should wear them and try a 5K. I don't know whether she deliberately bought those shoes and gave them to me in my size, or whether they really were accidentally too big. But she challenged me to run a 5K before I turned 40. And I was walking the dog one day, I was being dragged by the dog one day. And I realized that I was going to be 40 that year, and I better do something soon. So I took her challenge, and I went to a running club that was in my area. And I loved it. And 2 months before my 40th birthday, I ran a 5K. And I have run many races. I don't run races so much anymore, but I ran a 10K. I ran several half marathons. Philadelphia is well known for the Broad Street Run, which is a 10-mile run through the city. I've done that probably 8 times. But it spurred me on, and I was fearful. What if I look stupid? What if I fall? What if I can't run that fast? I've done all those things. I've looked stupid. I have fallen, and I am not a fast runner. When I run the Broad Street Run, it takes me more than 2 hours, and it amazes me that people are still out all along the route cheering me on, just like they did the winners who took 25 minutes to run 10 miles. It's not about them. It's about me. And that push. Right. So I did the running club for 2 years, and then I was asked to be one of the mentors. And we had to do a bio. And I took a quote from Runner's Magazine. I cannot remember his name, Amby something. The miracle is not that I finished. The miracle is that I started. And that was when I started to embrace the process. And also understand not everything had to have an outcome. You mentioned taking tennis lessons. I started taking art classes a few years ago. And quite frankly, I took it because I wanted to learn to draw window treatments better. I drew window treatments my first day in class, and I have never drawn a window treatment in class since. I've taken watercolor, acrylic, and oil. Some of the paintings that I've done are in a pile in a trunk. For me to not have an exact purpose, I need a painting for that wall, that space, that color. I let go of all of that, and I painted what I felt like painting. Some of it is really awful, Michelle. Some of it is really terrible. And some of it
I have a few of those at my house.
Some of them I've thrown away.
Really bad painting.
And
I have one right now that I'm waiting to repaint the canvas so I can start again. But you know what? When I did it, I was out on the, we have a screened-in porch, and I was out there, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago with the easel set up early Saturday morning, and I'm painting. And my 21-year-old comes out, and he said, "Mom, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm painting." He said, "Do you know how happy it makes me to see you do that?"
Wow.
And I said, "No." He said, "You used to do things like that all the time, and then you stopped." He said, "And I don't think I even knew how much I enjoyed watching you do that." Now, it's a painting that needs to go in the garbage. And if anybody were to look at it, they would think a 3-year-old did it. But I didn't have a picture. I didn't have an idea. I was just painting. And for him to say that really caught my attention. I think to me, he was almost saying, you're pushing through fears. You're pushing through having to be perfect. You're pushing through what other people think. You're just doing your thing. Right. So let me ask you, how do you think that experience, I know it had to have created a confidence in you that you could translate into business. How did you take that same courage of just get started, just put one foot forward, push through, so that you could push through a fear and actually see it positively impact the bottom line in your company?
So I think that mentality, I think I held it in that location. Oh, look, I can run. Look, I can do something I didn't think I could do. I do think the first time I ran the half marathon, I will tell you that when we finished the race, I looked at my sister and I said, I don't ever want to run that far again. I did it one more time. My husband has run several marathons. I don't have the desire to run a marathon. And it's not, you have to really want to do that, and you have to dedicate yourself to it. I don't have any desire to do it, and I'm okay with that. What I want is to be able to run healthy and take care of myself. And I realized that I set a goal for myself. I determined what was needed to meet that goal. And then I went after it, and I didn't let things get in my way.
Well, it sounds to me like you also had resources to help you. You joined a running club, right? You had a support system that was built into that. You had an internal conversation with yourself that I want to do this, and I'm going to let go of some of the expectations of the outcome. Not that they weren't in your mind. I mean, you certainly wanted to finish the race. So in the business side of things, though, who supports you? What resources come alongside you? And what gets you to take the first step? Because those fears, look, if we're fearful people, it's going to show up whether we're running, painting, working, doing the laundry.
Waking up in the morning. If fear is your constant companion, you've got to figure it out. Yeah.
Right. And you saw what I put out on Facebook the other day, that fear and faith cannot reside in the same house. Exactly. So if you're fearful, then you're lacking faith in something, right?
You know, we can take the spiritual side of it, or we can take, which is a large component of it, but we can also take you can't function that way, and you can't allow yourself to live if you're living with that as your constant companion.
But Ceil, it's even the faith that you know what you're doing. Right. So sure, there's the faith in God, faith in what your belief system is, but there's also the faith that you have prepared for this moment, the faith that you have done the work, the faith that, I'm going to show up and it's going to be okay. And that's where they can't be roommates.
And so I think the running comparison is a good one, because you can train. And you can, each week increase your mileage. And each time that you talk with people, can I refine my stride a little bit? But the fact of the matter is that there are variables that affect your running that you have no control over. The weather, your body. If I have eaten extremely well for weeks before a race, I can still wake up the morning of a race and feel sick to my stomach. Hormones affect your body. All of these things you've no control over. So what I had to say was, I'm going to do the best I can. And there were times on the day of races that I had signed up for that I did not go because I knew I couldn't finish because of a pain or something. And it wasn't I can't do this. It was, this is a mistake. I shouldn't do it. And it's a race. I can't damage my body and there were races where it was pouring rain and I said, no, this isn't safe. I'm not going to do it. I'm not a professional racer. I didn't need to. But I think that probably one of the things that's affected me the most in overcoming fear is meditation. I meditate every day, at least for a few minutes. I try to do it longer. And the longer I meditate, the longer I'm capable of meditating. Because there's a difference between meditation and mindfulness, but meditation helps me to be mindful. And then I can say, all right, what is it I'm feeling right now? Is this really fear, or is it anxiousness or anxiety or excitement? And while that's a new thought for me, I think the bonus of getting older, Michelle, is that I realize more vividly that the amount of time that we have is finite. And that, we've all heard it, tomorrow is not promised. I've lost enough people in my life that I know tomorrow is not promised. And the fear of not doing something is greater than the fear of doing it. And so when I recognize that, I get off my butt and I do it.
And that's changed. I mean, that was how you put the podcast out. That's how you've gone into coaching with Evernote. And so where do you think, and let's talk about the business piece, but where do you think fear fits in with where you are on your business journey today?
I've tried to look at it as not as an obstacle. It's going to be there anyway. So I might as well look at it and say, what is it trying to tell me? My husband, Bill, has been a great supporter. My kids sometimes will shock me in saying, well, why do you think you can't do that, Mom? You've done this and this and this. So I will sometimes talk with them about what I'm thinking about. And just hearing their, I mean, my older daughter, Elise, is so funny sometimes, like, what are you talking about? You can do that. Like, not even engaging in a conversation. Like, this is a dumb thing for you to be worried about. But at the same time, not dismissing me. It's just like, Mom, that's not. People within the industry, yourself, my WCAA group, so many people, Janelle, Susan Woodcock, Elke, all of these people have given me positive feedback. And I distinctly remember when I was still in somebody in our industry should do a podcast. That would be so cool. Somebody should. And you were one of the people who said, yes, you should. And so was Sarah O'Neill. And she said, Ceil, I think you'd be great at this. So not looking for other people to bolster me up, but knowing that those people are there to support me and give me honest answers so that I can then say, okay, that's just fear. It's not my gut telling me this is the wrong direction for my business.
Right.
With the Evernote, I think I was just so excited about the potential it had for people that I didn't stop to think about. Don't get me wrong. There are still times when I'm afraid. And I shared with you, I am teaching at the Custom Workroom Conference, and I had a nightmare that I was not prepared for it. I have been preparing for it for weeks and months already. I am going to be as prepared as I can be. But I literally had a nightmare that I didn't know what I was presenting. I didn't know who I was presenting with. I didn't know what my lines were supposed to be. So there's fear there, but the preparation that I'm doing is really eliminating that and making me feel confident in, I know the information, I know how to share it with people. And in the coaching, I think that moment when people look at me and go, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I go, okay, this is it. This is what I did this for.
You know, two things. First, that's exactly how I felt when I created Pricing Without Emotion, goodness, 9 years ago, that course. And when I get the emails about how people's lives have changed, that they now know how to price custom work, and they now are making money that they didn't think, and some of them, you know, are single moms or single income, and what they make matters. And I felt the same way with, you know, the Profit First and helping people understand and read their financials and going, so it was almost like I didn't even stop to consider the other side. I just thought, this is information you need to know, and how can I get it into your hands? And I think
that's the difference, Michelle, that I didn't create Evernote. I just want to bring that to people so that they can see how it will improve their business. You didn't create the general principles of accounting.
Correct.
But
I would have probably changed a few things if I had.
You knew how to explain it to those of us who were creative in a way that we went, oh, that's why I'm supposed to do that. That's why how I'm going to make money.
The second thing that I know about you that I don't think we have explicitly stated, as you have created a network of support around you to push you through your fear. Because I do remember when you were coming out with your podcast, and you'll probably shoot me when we're done here, but you told me you were going to put it out. Well, I know my top strengths are maximizer and achiever. So if I say I'm going to do something, it's going to probably be done in the quickest time frame possible, because I now have an entire plan. I've got an entire process back to my MIS degree. I've figured out I've analyzed it. I've thought about every, pothole I could hit. I've got a plan. I'm going. And so sometimes I assume that other people work that same way.
Nope.
And you, nope. And then I remember teaching you a course a few years ago, and I asked you what your strength was, and you told me your superpower was procrastination. But for some reason, I didn't connect those two things at the time. And so you had told me you were going to have a podcast, and I just assumed that meant, well, it's going to show up in about a month. Okay, so let's go. And I kept, when you said bulldogging, I kept calling you, Ceil, when is that podcast? I want to hear what you have to say, Ceil, when's it coming out? And then finally I called you and I said, what is taking you so long? Get the podcast going, girl. And you were like, okay. And I said, why don't we put some dates to it just to help you out, right? And you said, I said, only if you want to. And you said, yes, put some dates and hold me accountable. And so that's what I did for you, just because I love you and because I thought, I'm like Sarah, I thought the message that you had to bring, I would say primarily to the workroom industry, what was a voice that so desperately needed to be heard. And I didn't want you out of fear to hold back, to self-sabotage and to shrink. I wanted you to expand. That I wanted the best for you, right? But I also know in that is that you have an accountability partner, Sue. And so tell us about how, because to me, the thing is you've recognized that you have fear. You've recognized that for years it impacted the profitability because of a myriad of decisions that you made that were fear-based, right? Or short-term and not long-term, out of fear that the next client wouldn't come or whatever. But you have recognized that you've got lessons from running that you now can take those same life lessons and apply them to business. So the same way that you had the running club and the same way that you had all that, you have that on the business side. Tell us about that accountability piece and how that helps you, because I know you're very honest with your accountability partner, with each other. And that's, of course, necessary. Tell us, though, how you have been able to have an accountability partner and how that has been profitable for you and for the business.
So you mentioned Gretchen Rubin's book, Better Than Before. When I read that, I realized, she divides us into 4 groups, and it's not to put labels on us, but there's obligers, upholders, questioners, and rebels. And I recognized very quickly that I was an obliger, that if I have outside accountability, I am more likely to do something. If I say to myself, I'm going to exercise more often, and I don't tell anybody or set up walking dates or running dates with friends, now I run on my own. But in the beginning, I had accountability. I had to show up at that running club. So I realized how valuable that could be in my business. And Sue and I live near each other, and, WCAA got to know each other through that. Having an accountability partner, having you to be accountable for, to get the podcast out there, has been life-changing for me, in that I will not disappoint other people. And so if I tell you I'm going to do something, I will go through hell and high water to make sure it gets done. And I don't want to let people down. What will you think of me if I let you down? So there's my fear again. Sue and I talk about what our goals are. We sometimes get very specific with numbers. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's just, I need to get through this week. The end. That's the goal. We have.
Sometimes that's the best.
Sometimes it is. We have children that are similar in age, different lifestyles and things, but we understand what goes into working from our homes, having adult children living at home, which is where we are now, not when we started. We've worked very hard to make sure that we stay on track and that the things that we talk about encourage each other and support each other. The difficult thing sometimes is we love each other so much, we don't want to be critical. However, as you said, we want the best for each other. And we have stopped each other mid-sentence and said, what are you talking about? That's not you.
But that's
exactly. She has said things to me that encouraged me when that "who am I to be doing this" voice comes up. Who are you to not be doing it? And, how can you take this gift and not use it? And so it's always gentle, kind, and loving.
Sure.
But sometimes it's very firm. And you know what? Did you hear what you just said? You've got to change that. You can't keep going like that. And so that support has been priceless. I could not put a value on that. But there are times when I'd say, hey, what do you think about this? Or I'd call her, we're local to each other, and I'd say, I have to put an estimate out to a designer. What do you think about this? And she has said, are you out of your mind? That is not enough money. Okay, thank you. I needed to hear that and adjust it. So it's, yeah, we bulldog each other for sure. But I do know that there have been jobs that I put out an estimate for that had I not spoken with Sue about it ahead of time, I would not have charged enough money. And
right. And we all need that person
absolutely.
Behind us. So years ago, one of my close friends, Susan, said to me, I think I've shared this with you in some other areas before, but we were sitting at the table and I was telling her my dream for my business. And it included educating and speaking and all the things that I have been so blessed to do over the last few years. But this was years before any of that was going to happen. This is probably 10 years ago. Oh gosh, maybe 11 years ago. So before all of that started. And I remember just telling her, kind of, here's my dream. I don't know anybody else who's doing what I'm looking to do, but this is kind of what I'm thinking, but I'm nervous. And that, a little bit of why am I going to do that? Who's going to, and she sat across the table and she said, Michelle, I believe in you until you can believe in you. And that was still to this day, I think that was one of the sweetest gifts that any encourager could give me. I'm just going to stand and hold space for you. And I'm going to believe in you until you do it. That's how I felt towards you when you were starting your podcast.
You said that almost exactly that same thing to me. And that's, again, it's that part of me that needs to be held accountable. When I know that somebody's out there believing in me, then I'm like, okay, all right. I can do this.
Right. And isn't that what our children, they look at us and they think, my mom and dad think I can do this. Surely I can do this. Right. And it's such a gift. And so that has been a driver towards my profitability and my growth and my change. And it's a gift that I give to my friends and a gift that I give to my, people that I coach, my clients. Hey, I'm just going to stand right here and believe in you. You've got the tools, you've got the training, you've got the support, you've got the knowledge, you're not going off half-cocked. So the fear is not grounded from a place of not knowing or understanding. You've got all these places. Now what you've got to do is you got to take the first step. You got to step out in some faith that all that hard work is going to come, to a reasonable end and be profitable for you.
Yeah.
Right. And so just finding that and having somebody who can share that moment with you, it may be a spouse, it may not be, it may be an accountability partner, a friend, a colleague, someone in a completely different industry. And these days I see a lot of that in some of the Facebook groups and the ones where, that are truly, I would say, supportive groups. There are people out there sometimes giving some difficult information. But I would say by and large in most Facebook groups that I'm involved in, because if they're nasty, I'm out. But in most of the groups that I'm in, I'm watching people hold space and say to somebody, girl, you got this. Or, come on, dude, you got it.
When I see that. And I recently posted in the one of the private Facebook groups that you have about a struggle I had with a designer. And it was another reminder to me that I was over-explaining, not saying, here's my value if that's not right for your client. And you didn't even have to answer. Everybody took care of me before you could get in there. And
I just said, look above.
Nancy Letts and a few other people were like, oh, and Ann Johnson, you could say this, this, and this, or you could say no. And I shortened my email drastically. I said, what I do is, she was looking for a cheap way to do something. And I said, what I do is custom.
Right.
This is the cost of it. If this is what you're looking for, if that's not right for that particular client, okay.
And I love the fact that you wrote back in and just said that the designer was like, thank you so much. That's exactly what I was looking for. And sometimes we build it up.
And as a young designer, maybe she didn't know how to answer that client. And the other thing I think, a great reminder to me, Robin Matthews had posted in one of the groups that she had an estimate for a very wealthy client, big job, gave her the estimate, and the client said, can you give me a discount or can you do it cheaper or something along those lines? And Robin swallowed the desire to say, sure, I can take. She said, no, that's my price. And the client said, okay, no harm in asking. And Robin's
right.
response to that was, just imagine how resentful I would have been had I taken the discount off. I would have made less money and I didn't have to. I said, no, that's my best price, and I got my money for it. That particular, you know how sometimes things just affect you a certain way. I have not forgotten that one in particular as a reminder that standing your ground is the right thing to do. Robin knows her value.
Yeah. Believing in yourself, believing in your value, believing in your worth, and not making it just about price. Right. Okay. So next question. Okay. You ready? What is one of the next big profit goals that you have in your business?
Okay. So I, as a solopreneur, and as, you know, my dad was not a DIY guy, but he did. We often said when he retired, we were going to get a lot of stock and Band-Aids. We were very much about doing things ourselves. And so that mentality has come through a large part of my life. And my husband and I love to do things around the house ourselves. But I realize that there are things that are not worth my time. And since, as you have said, we have two currencies, time and money, I want to pay for more things to be done to free me up to be doing the things that I love to do. I had some kind of a mental block about hiring someone to clean my house. I believe that was from my mother-in-law and my mother, who you just wouldn't hire somebody to do that. Well, I did, and I do. I am so joyful and so happy. If I happen to be here while they're working, I'm in my workroom, I am getting things done, and I'm thinking, and my house is clean when I go upstairs. Or if I'm out at an appointment, I come home and I open the door and my house is spotless.
All in one day.
And the other part of it is knowing that they're coming keeps clutter from accumulating. So I know, you know, when they come, I need to make sure everything is picked up so that they can clean. So my house stays clean and stays fairly clutter-free, and it is the best money I've ever spent. So again, switch of the mindset, okay, what else can I be paying for? So that is my goal. What jobs can I source out? How can I pay someone else to do the parts of my business that I hate doing or take too long or aren't worth what I'm making an hour in my business to continue to do? And then the other thing is that I want to pay for a trip for my family. And I have not shared that with them. I'm hoping none of them listen to this.
I heard you there.
And I am going to hold myself accountable for this. I want to take us on a trip. My children are getting older. They will have significant others that they want to spend time with. The four of us have a good time together. And I want to spend some quality time with them as their lives really develop outside of our home. I know we'll always be close. I know we'll always be an important part of each other's lives. But I think the creating of memories has become so important to me. I don't want to buy things so much anymore as I want to create memories with my family. And again, you know, back to our time here is finite. And when I leave this earth, I don't want my children to have knickknacks that belong to me. I want them to have memories and lessons that I've taught them to take them forth and pass on to their children. So a trip for my family is my next big personal goal from the profit of my business.
So I've got to tell you the way I view this, having someone clean your house. I can remember my mother reminded me when I was a little girl, and she would tell me to clean my room. Every day she said I would stomp my foot and I would say, one day somebody's going to do this for me and I'm not going to have to be the one to clean the toilet. And she would say to my precocious little self, but today it's not that day, Michelle. Now get in there and clean your room and clean your bathroom. And I remember that when we first hired people to help clean our home, because I had a business, I had two children at home, you know, it made sense. And then my husband lost his job. And so one of the first things that had to go was we cut out the cleaning people. And so because I was still working and he was in between jobs, he started cleaning the house. And he said to me, as soon as I get the next job, you call them and tell them to get back here fast. And I said, okay. And we've never let them go again. But my view is this: the more my business brings in, the more I'm able to bless those men and women who show up to clean my house, because they need a job, right? The same way I need a job or a career. And so the more I make, that I can bless others by hiring them to do what they're great at. And so I've turned it, instead of looking at it and feeling guilty or, self-indulgent, I just look at it as I'm taking the money that I have, I'm keeping the economy moving, and I'm able to bless another family by giving mom or dad an income for fair, great work, right? And then I'm able to go about my day. And I think that's the part of profitability that I love, is that I'm able to bless the lives of others. I'm able to invest in things that I care about. And it's not just scraping by. And how we think about ourselves and how we push through those fears, as our conversation has gone today, it impacts the numbers. Because if we hold ourselves, well, let's talk about it two ways. One, profitable for us to grow as humans. The more fearful we are, the less we grow as humans, the less we put ourselves out there, the more constrained we are, which then leads to depression and lack of passion and, kind of rolling around with fear. But if you can get past that part, it literally shows up on the other side as, I would say, a positive impact to the bottom line of our company. Right. And then that gives us the ability to keep our home going, and then to bless other people.
And I think the having the faith to know that we've invested the time and knowledge in our business to know that this client is not going to be the last one. So as you said, I'm not holding on to everything and fearful of letting go of money, that if I have the faith that what I have learned and how I want to present things to people, if I pay someone to update my website, or if I pay someone to do something else, as you said, I'm paying somebody else to do what they're good at, what they will do in a quarter of the time it takes me to do it, and do it 10 times better, then and with joy, instead of me pounding on the keyboard going, why won't that picture load? That is a waste of my time. And I think that's been a big step for me, is to be able to say, okay, my business makes enough money that I can pay someone to do that and still be profitable. Not just have every dime. I think that was one of the things in those first 5 years. Every dime that I made went back into my company. And that's not a terrible thing, but I wasn't recognizing a salary or taking money out and saying, this is what I've earned. And that I think is one of the biggest lessons of Profit First, is to take that money first and make the business work within what's left. It makes you more creative. It makes you make sure that you earn the money, and it opens you up to, this is going to work. I know this is going to work. And that's been, I think, really important too.
That's great. So I love how you're putting yourself in a position to be successful, in a position to be profitable. I just want to recap a couple of things that you've said, because I think they are important. I think you have shared with us the awareness of the role that fear has played in your life, and then also in your business, how you have learned to become aware of it. And even more so now, the idea that those feelings could be excitement and not just anxiety, and not just all those things. Those butterflies
can be a good thing.
Could really be leading, to something really great. Then you've shared with us about even just having a support group and being around other people who are cheering you on and
absolutely
believing
vital.
in you, and having goals on the other side, because a lot of times we will push to meet those goals. And now you've stated them for, all of the world on the podcast. And so I can't wait to hear where you get to take your family. I'm going to say, put a date on it, because I'm going to need it, right? So I love you enough to say, put a date on it. But Ceil, I just thank you so much for this conversation. I know sometimes talking about fear, there's a stigma around it. And I wanted to remove that today, because if we don't look at it and talk about it, and I feel certain that it will come up on many podcasts, just in a natural way, right? But I think that if we don't talk about it, if we don't remove the stigma around being fearful, fear is not bad. It's not acting. That's the problem. And so I just really appreciate your vulnerability to share that with us today.
I think, Michelle, that one of the things that I've learned over the years is that diminishing that the impact that fear has had on me doesn't do a service to me. It doesn't recognize that I've outgrown some of those fears and pushed through them. So then I don't take the joy of having made that accomplishment. And I think that there have been a lot of things over the past couple of years, in our industry in particular, where when someone has shared something, they have so benefited so many other people that that momentary, what are they going to think when they hear this, goes away when you realize that someone is going to hear it and go, okay, if Michelle did it, I can do it. If Ceil did it, I can do it. And that to me is one of the greatest gifts I could have. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
You're very welcome. So Ceil, tell the listeners where they can find you. Where are you hanging out these days?
I don't tweet. I'll just say that.
That's okay.
I'm on Instagram at Ceil D, Ceil DI. My website is ceildi.com. It's CEILDI. And I'm on Facebook. I have the So Much More podcast Facebook group, and I spell so SEW. And my business, So Much More Custom Sewing for the Home, is still up and going. The Evernote training I have been doing quietly and not promoting as much yet, but I will be soon. I'm positioning myself to be able to reach more people. I'll be teaching about Evernote at the Custom Workroom Conference in October of this year, 2018. And I am starting to do small group classes on Evernote and reaching out to some of the local WCAA chapters and people. So they can find me on my website, on Facebook, or Instagram.
Sounds great. Well, I will have all of that in the show notes, along with some of the other things that we've mentioned. And again, Ceil, I just thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Michelle.